Hey there, welcome to Artane. So on this first clip I want to show a little bit how to make an entirely original image, starting from a very basic sketchbook-like sketch, going all the way through importing it and rendering a fully colored image in Photoshop. So first thing is I cleaned up the whole sketch, and then I'm kind of cutting it, deciding what aspect I want for the image and what basic color theme. So see me picking a color there, and then I just fill the whole background with that same color. And I at this point I have a basic idea of how the thing will look like, and I just pretty much do what we do in traditional painting. We just fill out the background and create kind of an atmosphere with a sky and a basic color theme. Obviously I sped up the process so you don't have to watch this for 2 hours, which is around the time that it took me to do this in real time. So I cut it down to about half an hour. So at this time I'm still finding the color theme and the color composition. And as soon as I'm satisfied with it somewhat, I immediately try to put all the color and color all the major objects, and of course also do that on different layers, as you can see. But the important thing is, if you want to be really fast, is that you don't create a shitload of layers. So you'll see me keeping it fairly simple by just having 3, 4, 5 layers and not a lot more at any time. So this way I can really be very fast and do layer effects or brightness and contrast corrections on the fly without having to think about which layer does and what layer was that again, and searching for stuff and getting confused. So I want it to be as intuitive as possible, also to be like in this case fast, because you saw the sketch is really shitty. It's very basic sketch, which is only like 10 centimeters by 5 or something like that, so not intricate at all. So what I'm doing here is I'm having one background layer, which is obviously the sky, and then one other layer is the ground, which I just painted on, and then the third I'm painting right now is the object, in this case the building, since the theme somewhat is architectural. Those layers will not overlap too much. Basically only where the building hits the floor, it is important that the building is in front of the floor. So when you see me switch off and on the layer, I do this to make sure I'm still on the right layer and I'm still covering a decent amount of color, and I try to not make it pretty opaque, so that that you don't have the feeling everything is transparent, and when you draw behind these layers, then everything you drew already gets messed up. So that's what I don't want. That's also why you can see I made the whole building and everything very solid, so that it's not see-through at all. So I did a little color correction there because, yeah, I'm still in the process of adjusting. Of course, I'm putting basic shadows and the basic rendering now, but I'm still open for other color compositions or some fine-tuning in terms of the color. So this is supposed to be one of these very quick and dirty sketches that you have tons of in your sketchbook, and some day you just look at it and you think, oh, that's a nice idea, why I don't make this a little better, and this is worth investing a little more time on, and putting some color and making this a full concept. So, which is what I'm doing here, but at the same time I don't want to spend 10 hours or more on this, and that's why this is a good example of how to do it quick and dirty. What I'm painting right now, these stilts, these beams, I don't have any clue what they're supposed to be. They just intuitively look cool in the sketch. So now I'm thinking while I'm painting that maybe they could be lanterns or light sources, and that's what I will also eventually go for. But I'm not sure about the thickness, and obviously they have to be thinner in the back there, and also shorter, which we'll come to in a second. But a lot of times it's a little bit trial and error is also involved, and you will see me also doing and undoing some things again that I was not satisfied with. So, which is normal. I mean, this kind of thing, if you do it and you don't have a really very good idea of what you want, it's more really like brainstorming on the fly while painting and putting color, which also of course takes a little practice to do. I realize that. So I just decided to make the building a little darker because I decided I want to have some lights in there, and for the light sources to really pop later and to create a nice contrast, I want the whole scene and the whole building to be a little darker. So this is just finding some details which obviously in the sketch did not exist. You saw the sketch, it was very, very simple. Here I have some insertions, what could be windows or whole window fronts. Obviously the dimension is pretty large, and what is in the middle there underneath or just above these stairs I was just drawing actually are people, which it's always a good idea to put some people as a reference for the dimension, and every artist will tell you that basically, so that you can see whether the whole scale of your entrance, of your windows, the height of the building, the height of the stairways and everything makes sense, at least yeah, is a good estimate. And so here I'm putting some more detail. Not too much, so don't get lost in the detail, which is you will never be fast if you lose yourself in the detail, which is also why you will never see me zoom in on this, because I have like a native resolution of 1440p, which is enough to see the amount of detail I need to see without zooming in. And the problem is with zooming in, if you zoom in, you start that, you lose the overview of your image and you lose the track of the whole composition much more easy. So I avoid doing that. I usually only do that when the picture has to be really good, and then also I won't do it until I'm like halfway through and at least 5 or 6 hours in, which obviously this point we will not even reach here with this little project. So here I'm putting some light sources, and you will see that the ones on the building I kind of like, but the ones on the stilts, on these beams, I'm not satisfied at all with, which is why they will go away in a second. So here the idea is that there's a lot of small windows in these insertions I created in the building, and here I'm just changing up a little bit the intensity of the light source. So I'm trying to trim it, but obviously it's shit, so I'm moving it away. So instead of these scratches that I used, I'm now using dots because I figured it would be cool to have like lanterns that point in different directions. So I'm putting dots in different sizes, which obviously I do it on a new layer in terms of something that reacts differently than all the base layer does, like lighting or something of high contrast that you want to edit, and you probably want to have it separate from all your other layers, so which is why I put it on a separate layer. So here I'm just cutting the shapes a little bit so that they're not all perfectly round and they seem a little bit more varied. Trying little things here. Now I came to the conclusion that of course those lights produce kind of a shine on the beams, so which is why I put those strokes. They're just parts of the beam that light is shone upon. So trying not to do this too regular, a little bit more chaotic so that it looks more believable. Yeah, however, you'll see that, yeah, I'm still not satisfied with all these very, very high beams in the back there. I figure they have to be trimmed down a little bit and also be a little bit thinner and have less contrast. So I'm just undoing some of that stuff again, which is fine, you know, unless you just undoing half of the time what you already did and really wasting your time. It's okay to go back a little bit in order to make the right emphasis and put emphasis on what is really important, and for things to make more sense in terms of scale. So here I'm putting some more spontaneous detail, let's call it that. A lot of times in this process where you don't really plan things, you just let some details happen, and if you like it, you go with it, and if you don't like it, then you do it again or you undo it. Obviously, a lot of painting and being fast is about decision making. If you're not able to make quick decisions and stick to these decisions, that is when you will fail and where you will get stuck and not be able to proceed and just sit in front of the painting and think, oh, is that the right decision or should I undo it? And if you don't know, if you can't make up your mind, that is usually when you get stuck, which is something you have to exercise, something you have to train to make these decisions. So here I'm creating a background. I figured it would be good for the building not to be all alone. Maybe it's close to a town or in kind of an urban surrounding. So that's what I'm trying here. Not liking it very much yet. Also checking contrast and brightness. Putting what is about to become little details or just very minor details that will basically require the viewer's fantasy to fill them out and to kind of make it look like there's more detail than there actually is. Yeah, still not satisfied with this, where this is going. Here I'm just trying to figure out why not blend this into the sky, into these clouds. That could be good, but then I don't like it really that much. But you'll see. So as things progress, you have to be able to, if there was nothing to begin with in the sketch, there was no background, right? So I have to make it up on the fly. So I'm just putting shapes and I'm trying to see something in there and then going with whatever those shapes could be. And of course it has to make sense, but sometimes you have to just let things happen, especially if it's not the main attraction of your drawing, which just something in the background or something to create atmosphere. Is really not that important how these buildings look like, as long as they serve the purpose of creating some urban atmosphere or whatever atmosphere you want. So you see I'm redoing these because I really didn't like them. And I figured out do them much smaller and not as high and a little more distant, so that this building would be kind of special and it would be close to a bigger city but not really immersed in it. Also, you'll not see me changing brushes too much. The brush tips I'll stick to maybe 2 or 3 throughout the entire process. So the basic brush you saw me using earlier is the one I'm using the most part for these simple images, which is kind of like a marker brush tip, a round one, which just reacts to pen pressure and it doesn't even have any size variations whatsoever. It's just a very predictable, simple brush that you can use to create hard shapes and at the same time do a little bit of blending, which is not too perfect, but then again is good enough to move on without having to worry too much that things don't look good enough. So brush wise, I always try to work really very intuitive, because if there's a brush that you don't really understand and it just does random shit and you can't really know what to expect during in the process, it's just a pain in the ass, because you will undo steps all the time and just basically try out until you get somewhat the result you hope for, which is not ideal. So here I'm taking that whole layer and I'm just adding a little bit of that building's perspective to it, which is fleeting towards the top, since we kind of created a cut perspective here. I put the horizon in the middle, but I still decided that it's fleeting towards the top, which would indicate that it's actually a cut perspective. But I could talk about perspective sometime soon, maybe in another video in detail, so you'll understand a little bit more what I mean by that. Identifying cut perspectives and how to do that. So now I like the background a little bit better, and I'm going back to the sky. I did a little bit more blending with some structural brushes that allows me to have a little corn, which I always like because it kind of resembles traditional painting, as well as the film grain style, which I also really like because it leaves room for interpretation. Little color correction on the background. Also on the sky, it doesn't need to be all that monotone and boring, so I decided to put a little bit more saturation and more color difference. And sometime you will see me doing that, just trying out a brush tip, which is usually when I need a very special degree of flow on the brush. The flow basically decides how thick, how consistent your brush stroke will be. And in this case, I don't want it to be consistent because I want it to have that grain of a traditional, say, very dry bristle or something like that. So here I'm just doing a little bit of perspective correction. Also on that light, that part of the light here, because it just didn't look all that right compared to the rest of the building. There's the good thing, if you have your lightning and stuff like that on a separate layer, you can just, as I did it, cut it out and stretch it or warp the perspective a little bit in order for it to make it fit really fast without having to redraw the whole thing. So now I'm coming back to the foreground a little bit and doing what is about to become the side walls. Also using that same, let's call it artistic brush that I just tried out earlier. So I want to have that little bit of a grain that really creates that feeling of concrete and of stone, without putting too much effort in doing all the grains and doing extra texture layers and everything. Just I usually don't like that kind of stuff because it's more using it Photoshop as an editor than it is really painting, and I'm really only interested in painting and getting my ideas across. I don't care too much for all the fancy detail that is really close to 3D rendering. That's not my thing, so you will not see that too much from me. So here I'm putting little strokes, little details, little indications of details. And this is a good example of also, you see me put the detail and then erase it again, or erase parts of it, which I do to blend it more into the environment and not make it stick out too much, and just make it more believable. Because a lot of the detail, or a lot of beginners struggle with making everything too clear and making everything too pop out, even if it's in the background, and in reality you wouldn't even see it that much. So be careful with putting too much detail too far away from the viewer, because you wouldn't, in reality you don't see a lot of that stuff. Putting a little more light in there at the entrance. Also making a shine, really simple, just with a very rough brush and an eraser. So if you do more and more Photoshop and you want to get used to that, you should really view the eraser as a brush of its own, which has a lot more benefits than the eraser in real life could ever have. So here I figure let's have some little details on the building. But I got it wrong a little bit, misjudged perspective or what I wanted there. So I just redid those in the back, and I went with less. So as you see, I still don't have a whole lot of layers. I have one or two more than I was planning to have, just because of the light and those one or two detail layers, but I think I'll get rid of some of them quite soon. So I'm just playing around with some shapes and seeing how these planes all end, and then putting a little bit more details, putting some handrails and some smaller details in order to make the whole thing more believable. Try out some lighting in that entrances, but end up not liking it and just going with them. Leaving them black. So now the people, those people get a little shadows, kind of shadows that you get when you put light from different light sources. So it's just one object has more than one shadow. It's going with that. So yeah, that green is shocking. I just I needed a little more color in there. I just tried out color and doing that on a separate overlay layer, which is always a good idea if you want to do some post color. And here I'm doing some color blending over the building, simulate the density of the sky, kind of forming around the building, and doing some I don't know how to call that, color blending, or things that you also see color leaking into shadows. So now, of course, the lights have to come. They have to shine on something, right? For them to be really, for them to integrate. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm putting some shine. Really simple brushes. I'm doing the whole blending now with the eraser since I'm on a separate layer. I'm just putting light and then I'm shaping it. I'm reshaping it. I'm blending it. And that's all with the same eraser. Yeah, you can see it. Starting out, I always put too much and then I just erase what I don't need. And of course, you have to train your judgment on that a little bit, order to make the right calls and not overdo it. Because with lighting, a lot of times people overdo it. They just put too much blending, too much light, and too much shine on everything, which ends up making everything look very artificial and very plasticky and like an over-rendered image or something very artificial, which is not what you want, obviously, at least not what I want. So in terms of lighting, oftentimes less is more, and the same I would say goes for blending as well. Because in reality, if you look into a light, you feel like it's very strong and it's blending a lot. But in fact, if you take a photograph or you see that in a movie, it's not as much as you think it is. So now there needs to be, yeah, a little shine from these lights, or it's at least from some of them. So this I'm doing with a grainy brush because I want this feeling of particles in the air that get illuminated. But I'm always doing the same procedure. First I'm putting more than I need, and then I'm erasing what I don't want. And I'm also not doing this on every single light source, because in reality some of them would blend towards the camera while most of them wouldn't. So it's not a good idea to do the same effect to everything. It just will look weird, because in reality that this will depend a lot of individual camera angles and stuff like that. So last thing I do is some blending from the light, which I did pretty heavy down there, but also I will erase it again soon. Doing that with, of course, the light color of choice, which is, like in this case, a very bright yellow, or a white that has a little bit of yellow to it. And blending and erasing I'm doing with, this time with a soft brush, which I barely ever use soft brushes at all, because I think they're no good for painting. They're just good to do something like this, which I would almost call post-processing, since you're doing it over your entire painting or over entire layers, and it doesn't really connect to any of the solid brush strokes. So now I'm taking away what I don't want of the sketch. So I'm erasing some of those lines in the sketch, and I'm getting back to erasing, to regulating that light blending a little bit, and actually end up doing less. If you look at it in the end, you have to feel it, but you don't have to be able to make it out. So once you're satisfied, you might as well put your signature, save the file. What I do then is I reopen the file as a JPEG, and I'm doing some little post contrast improvements and maybe saturation improvements, but that depends on how well I did it in the process already. Sometimes I will not put additional saturation or contrast, and sometimes I will do it, but I won't do it very heavily. It's just small corrections, and also some sharpening I tend to do. And yeah, I think most artists also will go for the smart sharpening. Yeah, so here play around with a little contrast, but then end up not doing it because I decided it's enough. It's good the way it is. Changing then the picture size of the JPEG in order to make it good for digital viewing in the web. Because yeah, if you have a big picture like that, and you sharpen that, and then you change the size, make it smaller again, the sharpen effect, it will not show as much. So I'll first do the size I want for the internet, and then I'll sharpen it. And you can see there's, yeah, in the video I'm sure there's only a minor difference, but if you actually want to see the whole picture, you can go to my DeviantArt page. I'll put link in the description, and you can see the whole sharpened image, the exact version you see here. You can see it and download it if you want to. So thanks for watching, and see you next time, hopefully.